All right, my Renowned fam, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Morris, and as always, thank you so much for joining us again this week. And again this week, like this whole trend this past month has just been military and vets, and today's no different. I'm joined by a dude today. He actually literally just got back from deployment this week or a couple weeks ago.
This week, Stephen.
Yeah, welcome home, man. Welcome home. Where were you deployed? Can you say?
Middle East has been the story of my life for the past 3 years or so. So this was a quick trip.
The Middle East, the place I love to hate. Um, now there are some cool places in the Middle East, but you get tired of going there after a while, and it's like just becomes monotonous. And you're like, can I go someplace else for a change? At least
Absolutely.
in my experience, that's how it's been. So,
Yeah.
real quick, go ahead, Scott, and introduce yourself and tell people what your expertise is and why they should listen to you.
No, I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you so much. I've been a fan of the podcast, been enjoying the conversations, and just truly grateful and honored to be a part of this renowned conversation over here. So, Scott Klein, originally from Skokie, Illinois. I know you and I share some Midwest chops, and right now, as we're recording, we were just talking a little bit about the cold weather. I won't lie, Stephen, I'm proud to say that I have escaped it for a little bit, thanks to the Army. Army has helped me out in that regard, so I've been spending a lot more time in the sand and in the desert over these past few years. But the quick story on me: grew up in Chicago, went to school all over the place: Israel, Detroit, New York. Developed a background ultimately both in business and then eventually in nonprofit management. Ended up getting a master's in that, a doctorate in education, and then at age 28 had that aha moment and decided to join the reserves. And that has not been going very well because pretty much it's been back-to-back deployments. And here I am, and I know we'll talk a little bit about the sort of the Army journey. But at 34 years old, I am absolutely loving my service, loving the impact, especially around leadership. And I host a radio show, really, really passionate about talking about service and talking about people.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. The guest I just recorded, he came out last week. His name's Atlas Altman, and we were talking about that same thing. And we were talking. He was talking about how it kind of bugs him, like because people always try to label him as having PTSD, and he doesn't like the D. He doesn't like the disorder. There's nothing wrong with him. Yes, there are things that happened in his life. There are things that happened in my life, I'm sure in yours as well, that were somewhat traumatizing. But to imply that it's a disorder is very discourteous, if you will. And he was talking about people. The problem is people don't understand. Like people like us, we intentionally volunteered to do something we knew was going to possibly inflict harm on us, and it was all about service. And it's not just service to the country, it's service to our brothers and sisters to our left and right. And I think that is the key piece that we are missing a lot in society today, and that definitely something we're missing in the workplace today is leaders understanding that leading is nothing more than service to others. Leadership's not about a fancy car, title, house, any of that. It's about how you can service and impact those around you. And so I think the fact you bring up in the very first opening section, like I'm loving my service, just speaks highly of your leadership journey so far in your young life.
I appreciate that, Stephen. It's interesting. Diving right in, when I came into basic training, so I commissioned as an officer through Officer Candidate School at then Fort Benning, Georgia. But I went through basic training, and coming in, I was prepared at 28 years old to be the big brother, the mentor. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but I knew ultimately the reason I came in is I wanted to lead. I wanted to make an impact. I thought, gosh, I hope I'm going to be able to to teach these young men and women that are, 10 years younger than I am, a little bit of leadership and so on. And hopefully I was able to do exactly that. But I will tell you, hands down, I learned so much. I did not think that I was going to change through the process, and I did. And ultimately, what keeps me going, what keeps me in uniform, what keeps me in the service is absolutely, I hate to say it to my commanding officer, it's not the mission, it's the people. Absolutely, hands down, the people. Especially in the Army, we talk about this very frequently. I say this to anybody who's willing to listen, is that, we don't have the fancy planes of the Air Force, we don't have the fancy boats of the Navy. Ultimately, we are very much a people business. And I've had some incredible experiences, some very challenging experiences too, and that's led me down the road to every day I get to put that uniform on. I mean, I sometimes literally I pinch myself because I'm like, gosh, they're paying me to do this each and every day. I come in, and on day one of my first job, my first leadership role in the Army as a brand new second lieutenant, 5 years ago, I was handed a platoon of 49, 50 young men and women. And where else is that your first job that you come into? And now, fast forward a bunch of years later, a couple of ranks later, I have an even larger impact. And there's no other environment where you can have that. But, and I know we'll talk about it, I will say that putting a uniform on is not for everybody. And that's not the only way that you can serve your country, your community, your people.
No, absolutely not. And that's such a good point, and that's something that's always frustrated me a lot. I shit you not, like this is not a lie. I legitimately had a private tell me one time that he hated the Army, and I was like, "Why do you hate the Army?" He goes, "Because it's nothing like Call of Duty." I was, and I looked at him. I'm like, "You're kidding, right?" Like, no one thinks that being in the Army is going to be. He legitimately thought that being in the Army was just going to be run and gun, like that's all we do. He didn't, and that's not anywhere like that's 1%, maybe for some. That's 1% of the job for 1% of the population. Like everything else is training and paperwork and red tape and bureaucracy and insanity and PT and more PT. And it's not an easy job, and it's definitely not for everybody. But I will say, the only way you're going to know is if you try it. And I thoroughly encourage, and it doesn't have to be combat. There are tons and tons of jobs in the military that will not put you in harm's way for the most part. I mean, everything has its risks, but you're not going to go my route, certainly. And, you could be a fueler, you could be a mechanic, definitely life skill type stuff. And, 4 years, you spend that in college, you know, I am thankful. I'm so thankful that I went the route I did of my service and then college, um, because the life experience I gained, college will never, hold a candle to the amount of knowledge and experience I gained from the real world being in the service. With that being said, if you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's not for me, then please, for the love of God, don't, um, because you're just going to put yourself and other people in harm's way. So, but yeah, and so if someone's younger and they're like, I really want to impact the world, but the service isn't for me, how can other people get that same? And I ask this legitimately because I can't think of anything, so hopefully you can. What are some other ways people can get that same feeling of service that you and I get from the military?
Sure. So I'm going to answer that in two ways, Stephen. The first one is I want to talk to business owners. Many people that know my name before the army, the pre-army identity, the way I always describe it is the man on the street test. If somebody walked down the street and, they were walking with a buddy and they saw Scott Klein across the street and they were like, hey, who's that guy? What would they say? What's that one line elevator pitch that they'd say about you? Most of the people that, from Skokie, Illinois that I knew would say, hey, he's the nonprofit guy, or hey, he's the guy that's, in his family business or something like that. So my identity very much has been around small business and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to stick to that theme for a moment in answering your question, Stephen, and then I'm going to go back to the younger folks that I think you're alluding to. But I have come across in my business experience a lot of opportunities to step up and serve. I was fortunate to serve as the chairman of the local Economic Development Commission. And what I found is one of the best networking tools that you can have, whether you're looking for a job, whether you own a business and you're looking to grow your business, is networking. Everybody says that. But a lot of people are very uncomfortable with taking that first step to actually, again, meet somebody that they otherwise would not have met. So I was fortunate to chair this commission. And on that commission, I had the vice president of the local Westfield malls, the shopping center. I had the president of the local hospital. I had a bunch of restaurant owners, and I had a bunch of, service-based businesses and so on, people that I otherwise would have never have had the opportunity to connect with. But because we shared a common interest, because we all cared about economic development and small business, we all have served on a commission together. The same is true. Again, you like puppies? Fantastic. Volunteer at the Humane Society, volunteer at the local rescue. You care about homelessness, the environment, pick the topic, and I guarantee there's an organization that's out there. Step up, reach out. I promise you there's an opportunity for you. I promise that there's a need for somebody to step up. First, maybe it won't be a very glorified position. You might be a fancy CEO, and that's wonderful and that's great, but they may need somebody to sit at the front desk and check people in, and that's fantastic. They need those volunteers. Mark my words, you do that successfully, after a little while, they're going to put you on a committee. After a little while, that committee, you're going to continue networking, and you're going to eventually find your way onto a board of directors, because Lord knows the nonprofit community needs that so much. And by stepping up, again, selfishly, you're going to benefit because you're going to meet like-minded individuals that likely there's synergies in your respective line of work. Or, by the way, let me add, even for those that might be, maybe in the back of their mind looking for their next career, I know people that have literally networked their way into their dream job. I know somebody that's working, I mentioned animals, somebody that's working as the executive director of an animal rescue because they started by volunteering and they proved themselves that way. And for the good of service, going to your question, Stephen, there's no question that you will have that tingly feeling that I feel each and every day. Stephen, I know that you've felt over and over again, of feeling accomplished and feeling like you had an impact with your service by doing that. And yeah, best news ever. You don't need to put a uniform on. You don't need to travel to sandy countries and be in the extreme weather and so on. So, I mean, that's one easy way to serve. And I'll jump in and go to the younger generation and speak directly to them for a moment. Without getting political over here, one of the things I think it was two presidential cycles ago, or no, last presidential cycle. So Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of your neighbor there in Indiana, one of the things that he talked about, which I thought was brilliant, was talking about a compulsory service. Not the idea of putting everybody, not getting rid of the all volunteer force and reinstituting the draft, but rather we should require. You mentioned that you're so happy that you went to that you served first before going to college. That I agree with that wholeheartedly. Absolutely. I think so many people need to figure out themselves and who they are. I lived in Israel for a year, and in Israel they have a term called Sherut Leumi, which basically is national service. And what that means is that for a year, post high school, folks will either, yes, join the military, but they might volunteer in a hospital. They might join an impact organization that might be traveling around the globe or around their country, around their state, or around their city. Again, we have a need for people to do things like that, and it helps you to mature, to figure out who you are. And I guarantee you'll be a better person for when you come into, again, college or wherever your career may take you. So service is great. I mean, don't get me wrong. In this day and age, it's no secret that all of the branches of the military, maybe I think the Space Force might be the only ones hitting their recruiting numbers, because I think there's the mystique of what they do. But we have a recruiting crisis, and Lord knows we need people to step up. And Stephen, you said it a moment ago, that there's fuelers, there's musicians, that we've got
Yeah.
bands, and by the way, that
Choirs.
do important stuff, and
Yeah.
so we need people to step into all of those roles.
Yeah. The cavalry has a horse regiment that does nothing but tour the world and go do parades representing the United States Cavalry. Definitely not we don't ride horses into combat anymore, but the pageantry of the horse cavalry, you know, can't be denied. That's won so many wars. And so we have the first cavalry, I believe it's first cav, has a horse regiment attachment that literally just travels the US, travels the world with their horses and goes and does parades and ceremonies. I mean, if you love horses, then that is definitely an MOS that you could find fulfilling. MOS stands for military occupational specialty, I believe.
I think so.
Um, so, I mean, it's your job basically. And so, I mean, that's definitely something that you could find fulfilling. But I want to go back to your why you were talking about it, volunteering. And volunteering is a different level of service because you're not getting paid for it, and it's something you're doing out of kindness, even if there are selfish ambitions, which I kind of challenge that notion because everything is selfish. I believe it was Joey and Friends said everything is selfish. Nothing you do is truly generous, like out of your own heart. Like there's always an ulterior motive. And I think it was Phoebe was trying to prove him wrong the whole episode, and ultimately she had to concede to his point. Everything she did, even though she was such a giving, kind person, ultimately it was selfish because she did it because it made her feel good. And if you do it because it makes you feel good, ultimately that makes it a selfish motive because you want to feel good. So, but volunteering definitely is a different level of service, and I agree. I believe it is the Mormons, I think, that require high school graduates to volunteer for a year in a foreign country. Um,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I think it's the Mormons. I might be wrong. If you know, let me know in the comments because I can't remember. But I know there's a religion that requires their high school graduates to go on and do volunteer work before they go anyplace else. And I think what you said really hit the nail on the head of what I was trying to say. In that the reason I'm so thankful that I went to the service before anything else is so now as I'm working my way through college and getting my MBA, like I know exactly who I am and I know exactly what I want to do. And I know exactly what my degree is for. I'm not wasting money, right? I'm not going to school to be a business major and then end up being a teacher, right? Or whatever the case may be. Like I'm going to school specifically for and it's not a question of what do I want to be when I grow up. I already know that. So, I mean, I think that's one of the big things. And plus, like the amount of knowledge and wisdom I have that I can apply to my schoolwork, I think takes my learning experience to the next level. The other thing is, by the time I left high school, I was so burnt out on school. Like, and I see that in my daughter right now, who's currently working on getting her PhD in oh, good grief, genetic engineering. Um, so I mean, she went straight from elementary, middle school. Then she got into high school and she did what's called early college, where you go to high school and college at the same time at the community college. And so when you graduate high school, you have a high school diploma and an associate's degree, and then you just get to jump straight into your junior year of college. And so she did that. And like I'm watching her right now and she's burnt out, and it is hard work for her to continue her PhD studies. And for her program, she has to take a year off and intern at a research facility or something like that. I don't remember, but she's looking forward to that because it's going to be a break for her. And I'm thankful I don't have to go through that, right? Because I had a nice healthy break. And then the other thing is my willingness to learn and understanding that the the true power in this world isn't wealth, it isn't position, it's knowledge. And so I mean, I don't feel like I had that understanding at 18. And now that I understand that, I embrace learning and I love to learn. And one of my mantras is, there's no such thing as a wasted day as long as you learn at least one new thing every single day. And it doesn't matter what it is, just learn something new. So I mean, yeah, absolutely love that. Agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, you're taking service actually currently, I believe, to the next level though, because now you're going from your current role in the military to, I think, the unsung heroes truly of the military. Talk a little bit about that if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm literally right at the cusp of that transition. So currently, I serve as a military police officer. And before everybody starts booing me, especially those veterans that are out there, yes, I was not one of those guys on the road. I've been very, very fortunate to have been in a number of different positions and roles, especially downrange and in the Middle East. And people actually like me. I promise you, people like me. But that's part of the reason why I'm making this transition. So I'm becoming a chaplain, and I'm becoming a chaplain, and I could talk a little bit about the experiences that led me down that road. But I'm Jewish. No secret there. I'm Jewish, and believe it or not, there are only 12 other active duty Jewish chaplains in the United States Army. I believe it's about 8 or 9 in the Air Force and the Navy, respectively. There's a nice handful more in the reserves and the National Guard, and God bless them, it's great. And they certainly deploy and fill a very important need. But I've had a number of experiences during my time, literally from day one in the Army, stepping into the 30th Adjutant General Reception Battalion at Fort Benning, Georgia. From day one, I was a Jewish lay leader because I pretty much have never served in the same place as a Jewish chaplain. And it's interesting. Military life, this perfect segue from everything we've been talking about before. It is different. It's not the same as another job. If you're coming in and expecting it to be just another job, I mean, like you said earlier, you probably should go take some time and figure yourself out first. Don't expect it to be a 9 to 5 job. You'll have more relaxed days, but you'll have far more very hectic and insane days, and that's where the chaplain comes in. I have seen how, especially in deployed environments, whether in combat or not, it really doesn't matter. Everybody has their good days and has their bad days. Everybody has their stressors, and chaplains fill a really, really, really important role. And I've had the opportunity both on the giving end and on the receiving end of exceptional chaplains. But I'll be candid in saying there's some not so exceptional chaplains as well. And when I think about, and I know I've already mentioned this in our 20 minutes or so in conversation, of the reason I came in is, and the reason I stay is ultimately around people. I couldn't be more grateful for having that opportunity to come into a role where it really is all about people. And it's funny, we have a term in the military where we say we PMCS, our vehicle, our weapons. I don't even know what that stands for, but basically we're inspecting.
Preventative maintenance service.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad you remember that. And we do that for our vehicle. We do that for our weapons. We do that for all of our gear and for all of our equipment, because we need to make sure, like you said earlier, Stephen, that we're ready, that we're always ready. And that's the job of anybody in the military. You know what the chaplain's role is? Make sure that the people are ready. Make sure that people's, again, mind and heart. And yes, you wear that cross, in my case, the tablets or the crescent, on your uniform. And certainly you are representing, and you are endorsed by the faith of which you subscribe. But ultimately, a chaplain is a chaplain first and foremost, and takes care of each and every one of the soldiers and service members that they are responsible for. So it's I'm right at the cusp. Officially, of my orders, will be going to the 82nd Airborne Division in just a few months, and
You get to
jumping
learn how to
rabbi.
jump.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When do you go to airborne school?
And in the next few months, they wanted to send me sooner. Originally, I was actually going to go about this time, but because I finished my seminary, but I have to go to the chaplain basic course at Fort Jackson, and they don't want to risk you getting hurt before
Hmm.
you show up at that course. It's a important scheduling thing. So they said, "Hey, go to the course, and then you'll report to your unit." And pretty much everybody at 82nd, as you know, Stephen, the second you
Yeah.
show up over there, they've got all the slots for airborne school. So I'll go, yeah, mid to late summer.
All right. Awesome. I'll give you a piece of advice, and you'll hear it when you get there, high and tight.
High and tight.
Keep your
I've heard
keep
that.
your straps high and keep them tight. And you will learn very quickly what that means. Just don't loosen those straps. To say, I don't care how uncomfortable it is, never loosen those straps. Keep them high and tight.
High and tight. And feet and knees together, right? Isn't that a
Yeah,
thing?
well, yeah, yes, feet and knees together, but
High and
downstairs is
tight.
far more important to me than my knees and my ankles. And if you don't keep those straps high and tight, you will be singing soprano the rest of your life.
Hmm.
Because that chute opens with a massive amount of force and it hurts if those straps aren't tight. So,
Okay, good advice.
yeah,
You heard
keep
it here
them.
on the Renowned Leadership Podcast.
And I do not know that from experience. I know that from seeing it happen to someone else. Um,
Fantastic.
anyway, I love that you brought up what a chaplain does because most people, especially well, civilians, they think a chaplain is just a preacher or a priest or whatever the case may be. Um, I would say that in my experience with chaplains, that is 5% of what my chaplains did for me. Maybe, maybe not even that much. For the most part, it is like you said, PMCSing our minds, our spirits, like being in combat, especially. I've it's it's very draining on your psyche, and you can get. And when I say spirit, I don't mean like necessarily your spiritual side, just your inner spirit. Can be drained. In a chaplain, man, they have those special quirks or those special ways to really just pick you up and revitalize, when you're beat down, especially if you've lost someone or you've just been having a hard time. Maybe your MWR is not working, and that always sucks when you can't call home. And so I mean, hard, maybe mail's not coming. That's another morale crusher. And I remember one deployment, we couldn't get mail, we couldn't call home. We have these things called blackouts. So if someone gets killed, it doesn't even have to be on your team or your unit, just someone in the general vicinity dies, then the comms get blacked out. So you can't by the rumor mill get that information to the family of the deceased soldier before the chaplains and the proper authorities are able to go inform them of the death. So, there were months at a time where we couldn't even call home because we were in comms blackout. And, you're not getting mail either. So, I mean, it's just, morale just horrible, horrible, horrible. And the chaplains' assistants played such a key, pivotal role and just keeping our spirits up and keeping us moving forward. So thank you for volunteering. I can't imagine. I know that's a thankless job. I know they don't get near the respect and gratitude that they should. Um, but it's a dirty job, and like Joe, what's his name? Joe, I can't remember his name. Does the dirty job show anyway? It's a dirty job, and someone's got to do it.
And
So
Stephen, I just want to share one more piece, which I think is
yeah,
important. The confidentiality that every chaplain and frankly their assistants have as well, to be able to just you can tell a chaplain absolutely anything, and that's really important to have that person. That again, military life can often become pretty lonely, and you always have a lot of stuff going on and being able to have that conversation. Chaplains, at minimum, have a master's degree. Many are far more educated and can often help folks work through some problems, whether it's personal problems, professional problems, and that's really important. And the other role of a chaplain is providing the counsel and the advice to the commander about the morale of the force, saying, "Hey, sir, ma'am, maybe we need to let up on the troops for a day. Let them catch up on a little bit of sleep, and pretty much it's you're the only person really that has the ear to be able to talk on some of those topics, but also around ethics. And that's an important role that the chaplain has to be able to guide on ethics, ethics of war, ethics of military, ethics of leadership, and so on. So, yeah, I'm super excited. It's been a long time coming. I've dedicated the past few years while serving simultaneously in a variety of different roles. Some folks step back and they take just focus full time as a chaplain candidate. I've been focusing, guns blazing in this area, and it's speaking of guns blazing, one of the things the chaplain does not do is carry a weapon. So
Is
it's
that going to be weird for you?
it is, I was just told by my unit a few days ago, everybody's going to the range, and they were like, "Hey, you don't need to go. Your branch started updating in the records, and you actually don't need to go." And I'm like, "Man, that is so weird. I'm used to actually being the guy, especially as an MP, carrying not just the long rifle, but actually always having a pistol with me and so on. So it's unique. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine a day in the military and not having an assigned weapon. That would be troublesome for
Well,
me.
I
I
can
don't
tell
know
you,
if I
Stephen,
could
I'm
do
going
it.
to interview my assistants so carefully. I'm going to make sure that they are so good at going to the range because part of their role is to be my protection. So
Right.
I will be going to the range. I will be staring at them like a hawk, making sure that they are hitting every target.
Right, because for the civilians, each chaplain has a chaplain's assistant, and like he said, that chaplain's assistant is armed, and it is their one of their sole responsibilities to ensure the chaplain's safety at all times because the chaplain cannot carry a weapon. And I don't know. Can you? Is I know there's very specific rules well, for like a medic. A medic isn't allowed to use any weapon deemed a weapon of mass destruction, so like a machine gun, grenade, things like that, unless it is in the protection of their own life, like they have no other choice, or to protect the lives of those in their care, so protect the wounded. Do chaplains have a similar rule to that where they can use a weapon in defense of their own life, or is it just pretty
Not
much
really. No, I
really?
mean,
Oh, you're just screwed.
yeah, pretty much. And it's
Nope, not
interesting because
me.
and that's based on the Geneva Convention, but other militaries allow the carrying a sidearm. It's interesting, and I still have a lot to learn. I know I'm going to be going to the basic course coming up in a few months, so I'm looking forward to understanding more. But I know chaplains have gotten in trouble, even in the heat of the moment of grabbing a firearm and using it for self-defense. There's very strict rules. So yes, again, that religious affairs specialist, medics don't have an assistant quite like that, and so your goal is
Right.
to have somebody that's there. And chaplains deploy absolutely on the front lines. And again, I'm going
Oh yeah.
into the 82nd Airborne Division. I mean, you jump right in with the infantry, and
Yep.
you are there on the front lines in every way, and the troops expect, they don't really always expect, their doctor, their lawyer to be, rucking and running right up front with them. They're expecting them, hey, be there when we need you. Chaplain, they want that chaplain to be there right there with them at all times. And that's a unique responsibility. I couldn't be more excited for it.
Yeah, I can remember several sustained fights I've been in and seen my chaplain just kind of wandering around fighting position to fighting position, talking to us, pepping us up, seeing how we're doing mentally, physically, spiritually, all those things. Yeah, the chaplain is right there in the fight, just not fighting the same fight, if you will. The chaplain's fighting a much different fight. Um, and I mean, in all regards, they're doing it pretty much alone. So I mean, yeah, I have zero. I got a lot of Scott. I got to be honest. I have a lot of respect for people like you because I have zero desire to do that job. Like zero desire. Nope.
Yeah.
Give me my
Yeah.
gun. Let me go fight. No.
This is literally, I truly believe this. It is the best job, the absolute the
Yeah.
best job. Not for everybody, no question about it, but it is the best job. And it's funny, I'll go back. I know we're sort of bouncing through different time periods, and hopefully, again, imparting some wisdom to your listeners. But it's interesting. When I came into the military, a lot of folks said, "Hey, are you becoming a chaplain?" Because they know my personality, and I've always been that kind of person, very much focused on again people and service, and
Mhm.
taken care of people. And it's funny, I was like, absolutely not. I wanted to do something as different as it comes. It's funny. It took me a little while to realize, like you said earlier, the role of a chaplain and the role that the chaplain plays. It's not easy. It's not
Mhm.
easy.
Mhm.
And I couldn't be more excited. It's interesting, making this transition. I probably would have had an easier time. I could have skipped a few years of training, and basic training and officer candidate school and all that sort of good stuff. Had I done this first, I wouldn't change a thing. I think having this experience, having deployment experience, having the experience of being through some of those, as we say, embracing the suck, early on, hopefully it will earn the respect of the young paratroopers, that I'll be serving alongside. So yeah, it's exciting times.
Now, are you going to go active, or are you still going to be
Oh,
reserve?
no, I'll go
Because you're going to be
active.
an 82nd. That's active. Yeah.
I
Okay.
will go active, and there's a logic behind that. Again, being Jewish, touching on that piece of things for a moment, there's a very small number of low density faith chaplains, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Catholic. There's small numbers, and so the military frequently calls upon, even those in the Guard and Reserve, to that meet that criteria regularly to fill the active duty need, simply because there's just not enough folks.
Right.
Come the holidays, we've already talked about the primary purpose of the job, which is just being a chaplain, but there are certain times of year, come Passover, for example. Passover, again, a lot of Jewish troops, but frankly, not just Jewish troops, would like to be able to observe a form of Passover, in the battlefield and so on. And so folks are being deployed. For me, ironically enough, and this sort of going down a whole different rabbit hole over here, is that I will actually have a better quality of life, and a more sustained relationship with my service members by going active, and as opposed to just sort of being activated here, there, everywhere. Having this life is certainly better for me, and I had to make that decision. So yeah, jumping over from the reserve to active. So lots of changes happening right now.
Yeah. Awesome. How's that? How does that affect your retirement?
So that's one of the things that a lot of folks have been giving me some good advice is checking my records right now, realizing that knowing good military systems, there's a high likelihood that things won't transfer over properly.
Right.
So I've been in for whatever it is, about 6 years or so, of which the almost pretty much 5 years have been active. And so the way it works in the Guard and Reserve is there's points. And
Mhm.
so those points transfer over. And so I will have the credit of whatever it is, 5 years of active service that will then jump over. And then again, my plan is to do this as long as the military will keep me, and as long as, very importantly, it feels impactful. The second, again, it starts to become just a job, I promise you, Stephen, I will be so out. I will be out so quickly. I will jump. I think you've already gotten to know me a little bit. I don't do things halfway. And if I'm going to do this, it's going to be all in. So who knows whether I do again 5 years, 10 years, or 25 years. Going back
Gotcha.
to your question, those years will transfer over and count.
Okay. I wasn't sure because I know it gets kind excuse me, when you go from active to guard or reserve, it transfers a little differently.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't know if going the other way it was the same or whatnot. But no, I love that. So how, I mean, you, like you said, you've been in for 6 years. You've pretty much been active for 5 of those 6 years. Um, what is your professional life outside of the military look like? I mean, it's got to be pretty non-existent at this point.
Yeah, I've been fortunate, pre-military, to have had a successful career. I've started a couple of firms. I've been involved in the world of education, and so I have continued, even while serving, to dabble in a couple of things. I've continued to teach. I occasionally classes. Fortunately, COVID. The one good thing that COVID did for me is the advance of conversations like we're doing right here, of being able to connect on Zoom. I still get LinkedIn messages messages, by the way, Stephen, from folks in local Chicago area that they're like, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a little while because this past few years have been nuts. Let's get together at our favorite Starbucks." And they don't know I haven't been local in several years, which is just nuts, which is crazy. So I've continued to be able to teach. I still do dabble in some things relating to business. I've been fortunate to have an opportunity with a Vietnam era veteran who absolutely admires my service, and I've been heavily involved in his company on the side. And I still host my radio show, believe it or not, in the Chicago area. It's on Wreaths Across America radio, and of course on podcasts everywhere. And I've recorded that religiously every Wednesday. Pretty much, I record it. Airs on Sunday in Chicago at 6 p.m. AM 560 The Answer. And it's funny, I've recorded literally from bunkers in the most weird places overseas, and barring absolutely impossible situations, I have rarely missed a recording episode. My producer, George, he deserves a lot of credit because he literally has pulled out all sorts of interesting sounds and reactions, and he makes me generally sound pretty good. Fortunately, people don't see the visuals of it, which is definitely a good thing.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree with that. Um, yeah, some things just shouldn't be aired on live broadcast.
Yes,
Anyway, no, that's awesome. Are you going and you're going to continue to do your radio show,
that's a
or
good
is the
question. That's a
will the
good question.
army
I
even
don't
let
know.
you?
Yeah, the army has been my radio show has nothing to do with
Right.
military at all, and so it's really focusing on entrepreneurship and a lot of the lessons that I've learned along the way, but also t speaking to amazing people that are doing amazing things in their and adapting and overcoming and all sorts of great stuff. So it really has nothing to do with the military. I will continue doing it for as long as makes sense. We have a pretty awesome listenership and have had amazing guests. So I'm sure the time will come that I will come off the air, but I promise you I will never stop sharing. I will never stop trying to teach and inspiring others. And it's a great platform to do that.
Right. And I love the topic of entrepreneurship. It's so funny, Scott, because if you would ask me, how long have I been out? 6 years. So if you would have asked me 6 years ago if I was going to be an entrepreneur, I would have told you no. And if you would have said, no, you're going to have your own company and you're going to have a podcast, you're going to be on YouTube and you're going to have, to be doing all this stuff, I would say you're freaking high because I hate all that. And I don't want anything to do with any of that. And then, the cards get dealt and suddenly it's like, okay, now it makes sense. And I'm going to go do this thing. And I absolutely love it. And I think the reason my answer would have been that is because I was scared um, of the idea of trying to build something like this because it seems so daunting and so unrealistic. And I don't, honestly, I don't even really know. But so when it comes to entrepreneur, did you ever feel that way? Like, I can't do this, like this, this is for the big companies, like I can't create my own thing? Or have you always just had that entrepreneurial spirit of just I want this, I'm going to go create it?
Yeah, so the my pet peeve is the word they. And I tell anybody who's willing to listen that don't use the word they. There's no wizard behind the curtain if you're familiar with Wizard of Oz. That's again saying, hey, this can't happen because dot dot dot. Almost always something hasn't happened because nobody has stepped up to make that happen. So I fortunately, and I credit my family, both my parents, but also my wife, who's very supportive, certainly of my service. And by the way, there's a way to be entrepreneurial while serving too. And I, try to do things in a different way. Entrepreneurship pretty much means being creative, being an innovator, and pushing past all obstacles to get it done. So to answer your question, no, I will say I never have been daunted by again, that's for somebody else. That's very much not my style. And I think to come full circle in this entire conversation, the main thing that I think makes actually folks that have put the uniform on, and folks that have served in some capacity, again, doing something larger than themselves, does is it provides that identity, that focus, that determination to push past obstacles. And that's what makes folks, frankly, excellent entrepreneurs. And some folks do go into big business, and that's fantastic. Take on a company, a role within a company, and that's fantastic. But no, if I still describe myself very much as an entrepreneur, even to this day. Even though day to day I'm not in an entrepreneurial organization, you could still be an entrepreneur at heart.
Right. Was there ever a time when that clicked, like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur? Or has it just always been something in your mind that you are? Does that
To
make
be
sense?
honest, I didn't always know what an entrepreneur was. I grew up in a family of my dad in particular. He is a small business guy. And when I joined him in business, he's in accounting. I always said as a kid I would never end up in the family business, but I was the only kid in third grade that had a budget, so I was doomed. That's a true story. But I joined my dad in business for a bunch of years, and that was my introduction. You're cracking up. Um, that was my introduction to the world of entrepreneurship, and I've been fortunate through my radio show to come across people that teach me entrepreneurship. I am by no means the expert,
Mhm.
but yeah, I didn't know what entrepreneurship was early on, and I'm still learning it to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what's the key piece of advice you could give the younger generation, 18, 17 years old, that think entrepreneurship is definitely their route in life? Because like you said, some people, big business is where they want to go, and there's nothing wrong with that. Definitely we need that. We need linesmen, we need plumbers, we need carpenters, we need all that
Mhm.
stuff. So I mean, but then there are the people that are just like, I'm not happy, like, and that's what led me to this. Is I wasn't happy in the corporate world. I was miserable.
Mhm.
Big business, not for me. And so it's like, I want this thing, and the only way I can get it's to create it. So then I had to go create my own thing. What's the key piece of advice you could give a younger person to be a, go do?
Yeah, first of all, seek advice. Mentorship is really important, and there's a lot of folks that are out there that are willing to mentor. So I'm a big believer in LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, I have absolutely cold called people. I'm fortunate I have a large network, but there are some times that I need contacts in a certain area, and I will absolutely cold call people. I will absolutely reach out, and so get on LinkedIn, seek out advice. There's a lot of good platforms, especially if you're a veteran. There's a site called Veterati, which you could sign up for using your LinkedIn account to seek out mentors in any respective area. And I know people that have made that transition quite successfully. But again, getting involved is a good way, especially in local community. Going full circle to what we were saying, getting involved and as you do that, you will meet people that you can turn to and have cups of coffee and have conversations and seek that advice, which is really important. And the main lesson over here is absolutely, push forward. If you have an idea, do not accept the idea that, oh, well, it's why am I it's sort of that imposter syndrome of saying like why me, why now. It's absolutely, if you have an idea and you're passionate about it, step up and try to make something happen. There's no wizard behind the curtain. Step up and again, using that term, make a difference, and whatever industry, whatever area that may be, or maybe it's just, again, stepping up because you have an idea. There are people that want that idea. and push forward. I've been so impressed with the ingenuity of people that I've come across, especially from some of the younger generations. And it's just wildly impressive. So step up. I'm always happy to talk, and I love to hear from people. And I like being a matchmaker and connecting the dots. I'm not the smartest person, but I do know people that are willing to share their time and wisdom.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And what, you're talking about push forward. That is one of my big talking points. And I love to use the lady that created Canva. Are you familiar with
Oh
canva.com?
yeah. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great
I love Canva, man. It is such a useful tool. And I don't know if you know this, but she got rejected like 200 and some times as she was trying to get financing to start this thing, and everyone kept telling her no, it's a stupid idea. People have, there's already Photoshop, why would they want this? And she kept fighting. Now she's worth like 4.3 billion dollars. um and her platform is like the number one go-to editing, photoshopping, like all of that stuff. Like her platform is the source that you go to.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, and
I didn't
I
know
just,
that.
yeah, I love her story because she fought for what she wanted. She fought for what she believed in. She fought, even though everyone told her it was a bad idea, she knew it wasn't a bad idea, and she fought for it. And it has, after some many painstaking years, led to her success. And if you want to go a step further, the guy that created Starbucks got turned down several hundred times as well from bankers because they said no American is going to go want to sit in an Italian style coffee shop and pay $5 or whatever it was when he started for a cup of coffee when they could just make coffee at home. Well, lo and behold, pretty much every American wants to go sit in an Italian style coffee shop. And it wasn't, but he understood something that the bankers didn't understand is he wasn't just selling coffee, he was selling like a form of status almost. And if you do it right. So yeah, I love that advice. Have your idea, stick to it. If it's a good idea, it's going to sell. You just have to, it's not going to sell the first time maybe. And that's the other thing, man. I hate success because we are sold this garbage BS version of success, right? We see YouTube videos of that dude landing his BMX trick, and it just looks impossible, and he lands flawlessly. But what we never see is the 3.5 years of him landing on his face that required him to get the skill necessary to land that trick. And that, to me, that is the prime definition of what entrepreneurship is. So anyway, so we're coming up on time, Scott. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing just your life and your story and your wisdom. Real quick, tell people how they can get a hold of you if they want to talk to you and get some advice from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate this opportunity so much, Stephen. My website, syklein.com, super easy to remember, syklein.com. That's where you can find out all about me, get in touch with me, find out about the show that I mentioned. And again, anybody who wants to talk about service and leadership, I'm all about it. But truly grateful for this opportunity and share with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. And of course, I'm going to have all of Scott's links in the show notes and in the bios below. So make sure you scroll down and give him tons and tons and tons of love. Once you're done doing that, head over to redonleadership.com and come give me tons and tons of love as well. There's plenty of love to go around. Make sure you share. Anyway, Scott, you've heard the podcast, so you know the deal. The guest always gets the final word of wisdom before we go, and the question's always the same. What advice do you have for our listeners to lead like champions?
Well, you've heard it over and over again, so I hope our listeners aren't tired of hearing it. But serve your community, step up, make a difference. Again, be that change, be that difference in your community. Whether it's again putting on a uniform like Stephen and I, or whether it's volunteering at a local animal shelter. our community, our world needs people to step up and make a difference now more than ever. But thank you
I
again.
agree. I agree 100%, brother. All right, that's going to wrap it up this week for the Renowned Leadership Podcast. As always, guys, I say it all the time. Thank you so much for spending this past hour with us. We appreciate it. We are truly honored. And I will see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. And in the meantime, everybody, never forget, never ever forget, lead like a champion. Goodbye, everybody.